So again, we're talking about relationships, and we're going through this whole series and we just want to go more than just purity. We want to talk more than just like having a purity talk about like how not to have sex until you're married. That's an important piece of this. Don't not hear that. Mike never said that, so I guess it's still good. Do we any of us talk that way? I don't think you do. If you do, come talk to me. You need help. All right. I'm just kidding. Thanks. Whoever that word, okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, so guys, but I want us to go through a couple of things where we've been and kind of explain where we're going again for tonight. We're going to title tonight's talk, How to Break Up with Somebody. Now, I realize that we aren't actually getting into some of the mechanics of how to actually break up with somebody, and that sounds like some people are really interested in that. So I don't want to just like pull a fast one and just be like cute with the name. So next week, we can actually talk about how do you legit break up with somebody. If we're a Christian or if we're a follower of Jesus, what responsibilities do we have on that? We can maybe talk about that next week. We'll see. But we're going back to where we've been. Okay, guys? You guys following? You guys tracking? You guys ready for this? Speed round. All right. We started the whole series with the idea that saying that relationships and sex is God's idea. Do you want to play that? Sex is God's idea. He blessed sex. He said, go be fruitful and multiply. That was God's plan, God's design. And he made sex awesome. He made sex feel good. He made sex everything that the world kind of says that it is. He made it that way. But now the next thing is this, is that sex is only good in God's context. Like a flame is good in a pot. It's good in a engine. It is good when it's heating up boilers or creating energy for us and steam. But it is terrible and causes pain and destruction when it's outside this context. God's context is in marriage, in a committed marriage relationship. And there's a lot of really good things and a lot of awesome things that go with that. But here's the other thing. Sex is, we'll talk more about the actual, no. I gotta stay focused, because last week I kept you guys here forever, and I'm not gonna do that today. So no side rant on that one. All right. Oh, but anyways, the next thing is a relationship is meant to tell God's story. That your relationship, as you're together, as you're in a relationship with one another, in a marriage relationship, it is meant to tell the story of God. It's His grace, His goodness, His forgiveness. How you forgive one another should tell the story to the world about how God forgives us. How you love one another sacrificially should show the world how God's sacrificial love looks like for us. And the reality is there's a lot of people that don't know about God, don't know about Jesus, and if they hear about it, they don't trust it. But when they see you and they see you live it out, it changes things for them. And for many people in the world, you're going to be the only Jesus that they see. And as we in a relationship, there's a difference in this world. Our marriages and our institution of marriage is broken in America. And a lot of us are a part of that system. We've experienced it firsthand. God has a different story for us to tell, and it's the story of Jesus' love, redemption, and purpose, and patience, and love, and self-sacrifice for us. And in a marriage, when we're in that right context, when you're in the right kind of dating relationship and you tell that story, you're in a marriage that lasts forever. And ultimately, what I want for you guys isn't just to be a revolution now. I want you to be a revolution for the rest of your lives. When you graduate this place and you graduate high school, that you continue to live the revolutionary life of Jesus, because that's what changes things, and that's what's going to matter. And so really, ultimately, you're going to date maybe a couple people now, maybe a lot of people, maybe no people now. But you're going to be living with Jesus forever, and hopefully you'll end up in marriage. If you end up in a marriage, you'll have a relationship that tells that. That's the next thing. Decide. Last week we talked a little bit about, okay, so that's God's plans for relationships and sex, just a general gist of it. But then last week we talked about if you're going to date, if you're going to go anywhere, you need to decide before you start the kind of person that you want to be with. Because relationships and marriage don't just happen. And a lot of times we settle because we get caught up in infatuation. We get caught up in the sort of the early feeling stage, and we do crazy things because we feel that stuff. And last week we looked at that Bible verse that says, don't awaken love until it so desires. That love, when it starts to take root in our lives, takes a life of its own. And we've been through that. We know what it's like sometimes to feel that. And it's crazy. We do crazy things. You can look at last week's talk online if you want to see some of it. Because I have a lot of those stories, and I'll probably share some more tonight. We'll see what pops out of my brain as we talk. But again, speed round. All right, so you need to decide before you start. And the one thing I want us to take away from last week is this, is that you need to make godly character your top priority in the people that you date. Godly character has to be the top priority. In the Song of Solomon, which is a beautiful song about relationships, romance, and sex, and celebrating like sensuality and all that kind of stuff, it's a beautiful book, and it's awesome, but it starts off with talking about the man. What draws the woman to the man was his name, his character. Character matters in your relationships, and you need to find someone with godly character. You need to find someone with godly character on the top of your list. But for you to do that, you need to begin living a godly life now. Because you're not just going to find a godly person and it's just not just going to pop in. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But the reality is that someone's not just going to jump in your life and be like, hey, I'm godly, want to follow me? Sweet. Like, as you start to follow Jesus and pursue Jesus with your life, then you will start to attract other people that are pursuing Jesus and following Jesus with their life, and you'll find someone with godly character. It's not rocket science. And so if you don't like the fish that you're catching, we talked about this last week, if you don't like the fish that you're catching, you may need to look at the bait that you're using and change the bait that you're using. If you're using things other than godly character to attract the people to you, then you need to kind of rethink that and change that. If you're not attracting people that are living godly lives, you may also need to look at the pond that you're fishing in. Like, you may try to expect to find a godly person in a circle of friends where there's no one in that group right now that's going to provide that for you. And that means some hard decisions for you, but just some things to think about as you move forward. Because I see people fall into the same patterns over and over and over again. And I've been doing ministry now for 17 years, and I feel like, man, every year I feel like the same things just keep hitting the shore over and over again. And they relate to these things, and so you guys can break the cycle, please. Okay, moving on. We talked about godly character, and for that to happen, it's so important because the picture that God gives us in marriage is one of mutual submission, one where both people are willing to lay down their lives for the other person, to trust the other person fully in the other person's hand. And the only person that I would ever trust in my hands is someone who's living a godly life, who's made God their top priority. That's the only person I would give my whole entire heart to. Now, it doesn't mean that we're all in process, that we all don't have different places of faith and that kind of stuff, but that the end goal of our heart and desire for us should be godly character. And we read this passage. I'm just going to share it with us again because I don't feel like we hear it enough. And if you don't go home and read it on your own, you're going to hear it from me at least. So this is in Ephesians 5:21 through 27. And Paul says this: submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And he goes on to say, and there's both of you. He's going to explain both submissions, both the wives and the husbands. And he starts with the wives. And he says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as you do to the Lord. Basically, how you trust and love your Lord, trust and love your husband, live for him. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Jesus came to love and die, and we surrender, we submit to that person. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so wives also must submit to their husbands in everything. Again, this is not meant to be abused by men, which oftentimes it is. Submit to me in everything. Go wash the dishes. Submit. That's not what this is talking about, okay? So please don't hear that. It's a heart submission. It's a direction of life. It's saying, everything that I am, I trust in your hands, and I will go where you lead. And then it says this: husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Basically, men, if you think it's about the wives submitting to you, really the bigger act of submission falls on us. We've got to love our wives so much. It's just like Christ loved us, which was a perfect love, a sacrificial love. He gave himself up for us to make her holy, cleansing by the washing with water and through the word. Our goal in a relationship, guys, is to just give everything to that and make sure our brides, our wives are just soaring, are confident, feeling whole, are cleansed, are understand God's word and feel holy, and then present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any blemish, but holy and blameless. That our job is to help just our wives to succeed, to help her understand who she is in Christ and our goals. And so last week, a couple people said it felt like a little bit like a marriage talk, which, to be fair, it really was. It wasn't really about dating. It was really about the end result. And we talked a little bit about how that we live with one another, but with godly character, that's the end. But ultimately, hopefully, your dating relationship one day is going to lead to marriage. And you have to begin with the end in mind. You have to understand what you want first. And if you don't decide that first, it's going to lead to you ending up somewhere else. I'm going to say this at the end of the talk, but I'll say it right now too, is that if you don't plan, if you fail to plan, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. Does that make sense? It'll be on the slide at the end. But if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. Basically, that you have to understand where you want at the end in mind, and that's really, really important. So, but what about dating? What do we do with dating, right? So just turn to the person next to you and say, what about dating? What do we do with that then? Because that was a marriage talk last week. No one's doing it. That's awesome. I love it. I just saw some people just like cross their arms. Nope, I'm not even turning. I'm not even talking to the person next to me because they looked at me in the eyes and said something about God wanting all of me, and it freaked me out. All right, so what about dating though? Because the reality is that your heart's going to fall for other people. Sometimes your heart's going to want who the heart wants, and sometimes you're going to find yourself attracted to people. You're going to find yourself thinking about people more than you want to be thinking about them, whatever. It's just going to take over us. When do you date? How do you date? And what do you do with dating? I'm going to give a couple of stats on dating. There are some things that are really interesting for you. Only about 3% of high school relationships end in marriage. Whoa. Sorry, guys. That means very few of you, if you're in a relationship right now, is going to end in marriage. Now, that statistic changes when you look at seniors, but we're not going to go into all that kind of thing. But if you tie up all the relationships that you might have throughout high school, including everyone that you date, you add it up. I mean, it makes sense. Like, you probably date several people before you find that person in high school, even if it's a high school relationship that meant a marriage, that you dated several people before you found that person. So just statistically, very few of them will end in marriage. And if you look at the divorce rate amongst people who marry out of high school, it's significantly higher than the average national divorce rate. 65 to 70% of high school relationships that turn into marriage will end in divorce. What? My daughter does this at our house when I say something that's not funny. I don't know where she picked this up, but it's beautiful, and it makes me feel terrible at the same time. I'll say something that I think is funny at the dinner table, and it's just silence, and we're eating food, and I hear her going, wah, 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 wah. But I don't know. I'm going to film it one of these days, and you can see it on the web. It's beautiful. Comedic genius. I love my daughter. But anyways, in the same way, guys, I don't mean to break bad news, but relationships that are starting now don't often lead to marriage. So why do you do it? Why do you date? What's the purpose of dating? Hopefully in your C groups you'll have some time to talk about that. Like, what motivates a person to date? If you know it's not going to end in marriage, just because you want someone to fill the void? Is it just because you want somebody to make out with? Is it just because you want to get physical with somebody and because there's physical attraction there? Is it because your heart needs them to feel whole just for a little bit of time? I'm kind of saying the same thing in multiple ways. I'm kind of getting redundant, so I'm going to stop because we're moving on. But what motivates you to date? There's lots of different things that motivate us to date. Sometimes it's status. Now, it's not necessarily like the cool factor status, but sometimes it's just a status of like, man, 3 or 4 of my friends have relationships, and every time I hang out with them, they're always talking about their boyfriend this, their girlfriend this, and they're always doing this. I'm like, hey, want to hang out? No, I'm with my bae. What's up? Can't do that. Whatever. You know, and I would call them, I was like, no, I can't. So whatever, and you're like, well, I need to get myself a bae. So you find yourself a bae on eBay. Check it online. Russian maid service. We're married. That's fine. I'll get married because Mike said we'll end up in divorce. This won't last forever. Okay, so terrible. Okay, so anyways, so whatever it is, or maybe it's just the status of like someone that you feel like you have something to talk about, or you feel like it makes you look older, or have I don't know, whatever the reasons are. There's just lots of different reasons that cause us to date, and there's a lot of really bad motives. Okay, so make sure you keep that in mind. 2, another thing you need to remember is that dating has a really incredibly powerful influence on your life. Dating is an incredibly powerful influence in your life. And for a time, dating can have more influence, just for a season, can have more influence than your parents, your friends, or even your personal convictions. And we see this all the time, but dating is really, really important. I mean, really has a huge influence on how you think about yourself, huge influence about how you think about life, how you think about your own personal choices. It can cause you to feel like it's okay to compromise when before you're in the relationship, you're like, I'll never compromise. And then halfway into the relationship, you're like, well, maybe compromising isn't so bad. Or I'll never do this. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, you know what, that seems kind of good right now. Whatever it is that you have, or maybe your parents have ideas or things for you or directions for you, and in that relationship you're like, I'm not going to go do that. I'm not going to do that with my life anymore because her and I are going to go off and get married and live happily ever after in Tahiti. Tahiti, I don't know where that came from. That's the first place that came to my mind. Anyways, Tahiti's not a bad place to land, but most of you won't end up in Tahiti unless you'll be like a beach bum. Is it Tahiti in the islands, isn't it? Is that Hawaiian? Hashtag failed geography. Okay, but whatever it is, you need to understand this, though. This is really, really important. We talked about that in the infatuation stage a little bit last week, but we sometimes do some crazy things, and a lot of times, think about even in your own friendships, and some of you guys can know this because I know you're going through it, that we have friends, and all of a sudden we feel like we've lost some of our closest friends in a relationship, and by the time that relationship ends, you sometimes wonder who's still going to be there for you, because you realize, if you're honest with yourself, you kind of cut everyone else out, you boxed everyone else out, or you realize that all of a sudden 2 people are dating each other, and like, my friends are dating him, or I'm dating him, and all of a sudden you start dating and you hang out with all their friends, and all of a sudden everyone starts hanging out, and then you break up, and it's like, oh, who do we be friends with? Which side do we pick? And all of a sudden, friends groups start picking and breaking apart. We see pain and heartache come through those things when dating goes wrong. Causes gossip, reputations come out of dating. Dating is just incredibly powerful. So before you date, or if you're in the middle of a dating relationship, don't just do it. Don't just go. Don't just do it, and don't just date. See what you did there? This is one of those nights, guys. You guys are hopefully going to be really patient with me, but keep those things in mind. And that's why tonight, if I could offer you guys some direction or some wisdom, whether you're in a relationship right now to evaluate the current status of your relationship, or if you're thinking about a relationship and you're going to get in a relationship, if this could help you guys avoid some heartache and pain and set you guys up for a relationship that is good for marriage, that would be awesome. But again, if most relationships end in breaking up before the end of high school, really think through before you even date, what is the purpose of me getting with this person if I know one day I'm going to break up? What is this going to accomplish for me in my walk with God? What's this going to accomplish in their life? And that leads me to my first point. Oh, last thing. No, we'll move on. No, we won't. Okay. I'll say that one more time about the powerful thing. But because when you're infatuated, it's a powerful time. That's the first thing I want to say is infatuation is a powerful time. And you know this because it causes you to become actually physically blind and lose reason when you look at another person. Have you guys ever dated somebody or you're infatuated with them and all of a sudden their flaws mystically disappear and all that's left of them is and there's things that they do that are really basically annoy everybody on the planet, but for some reason, because you're infatuated with them, it's super cute. I love, there's one girl in my life, and I thought she was super cute, and she had this thing where she would chew on her gum, smack on her gum, and I don't know if I was just infatuated with her lips at that time, because every time I hear her, I'd be thinking, whatever it was, I would zone in. I'd be that is so cute how she do that. And then sometimes she'd do this thing where she'd kind of cock her hip out like this, and she'd kind of put her hand here, and she'd talk, and she'd twirl her hair in her fingers, and she'd talk. And then she started talking to me when we started actually liking each other. Something happens in the way that you talk with people, because all of a sudden you don't talk in normal things. You start actually using baby talk. What? I am sad to admit, but I was in a relationship where all of a sudden she's okay, Mikey. I'm she called me Mikey. I liked it. That's terrible. And then she was call me Mikey. She's okay, Mikey Pooh, Mikey Bear. I'm this is seriously out of dating don't ever do 101. And she's doing all these things. And I'm these things are so cute. Come week 2 and in week 3, I wanted to rip the gum out of her mouth. I wanted to shave her head. And I wanted to just put duct tape over her mouth because I never want to hear Mikey Pooh again. But it's true, because no, I didn't, okay, that's a little violent. I never did those things. I'm not on the run from the police, I promise. Okay, because those would all be really horrible things to do to a person. But think about it. I know infatuation is important, but here's a statistic about infatuation. It's a very short time. While it's a powerful time, it's only a short time. Infatuation lasts typically one day, but it lasts up to 65 days. And those 65 days in a relationship getting started are sometimes during that powerful time that we oftentimes lose reason and make choices that are sometimes lead us to things that cause pain and heartache and other things. And so to help us avoid some of those things and help us not be one of the statistics, I want to encourage you guys to think of 4 points, and I'll do some side points along the way. You guys ready to rock and roll with me? So everyone hold up your hand like this. 4, which in my family means, I love you lots. Okay. This is terrible. Okay, we're moving on. Dating. First thing. This is the first thing you need to keep going things. Number 1 for dating. You are dating somebody else's husband or wife. What? No, he didn't just, yeah, think about it. You right now, if you are not married and you're marrying, hopefully not dating somebody who's married, creeper, and you shouldn't do that because it's wrong. You're breaking up a home wreck or whatever. Always takes 2 though. Always takes 2. So don't be getting on Maury and saying, I can't believe he did that with whatever. Dating somebody else's wife or husband. This is really important to think about. If you are not married and you're dating someone else again who is not married, then hopefully one day, if you think about getting married, then that one day you're going to be that person's husband or you're going to be that one person's wife. And until then, until you have a ring on your finger, if you like it then, anyways, until you have that, you are dating potentially someone else's husband or wife. Now imagine sitting in the room with that person, the husband and wife, and if whatever you're doing with that person you couldn't say with integrity, honesty, or okay without blushing, then maybe what you're doing you shouldn't be doing. Okay, simple as that. And it doesn't sound kind of harsh, sounds kind of straightforward, but the reality is if you're going to help guard or protect somebody else's future, then you need to think about your actions. And if you can't talk about your actions or how you've treated or talked to or behaved with that person in front of their future spouse, then you need to think through your actions right now, because right now you're not helping them become a better spouse or a better husband. I love this passage in Hebrews, and it says this: marriage should be honored above all. Is it up there? And the marriage bed should be kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. Marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed should be kept pure. When you're dating somebody else, if you're dating somebody else, again, you're dating someone else's future husband or wife, and even if it's your wife or not, if you want to help that person get into this situation and live out this passage, then you need to help keep the marriage bed pure now, even before they're married. That goes for your life, and that goes for the life of the person that you're dating. And to guard that and to help that person out, to help that person succeed. And whatever baggage they're leaving from your relationship, they're carrying into another relationship. And this is something that's happening when we're dating, is it's creating deep ridges in the way that we relate with one another. It creates patterns in how we relate, how we handle conflict, how we think about love, how we trust other people. Sometimes we have a hard time trusting other people because of the relationship before us. How many people have you heard people say, or you're seeing on TV, or have you said yourself, yeah, I'm just not really ready for a relationship right now because my last relationship left me in a lot of pain. We carry the relationship before us into the relationship we're going into. And if you're in a relationship right now, are you helping them becoming the person that they should be with the person that they should be with later if it's not meant for you guys to be together? And what you're doing right now, are you doing something that's going to help carry with you into that person? Is that making sense? Okay, I feel like I'm getting redundant there. So I'm going to continue to move on. This is the first thing, though. So remember, you are dating someone else's wife or husband. So be careful in what you do, what you say, and how you act. Second thing is this: how you start in the relationship is often how you will end in the relationship, okay? How you start your relationship is often going to be how you end in your relationship. I'm going to give you 3 examples. Hot and heavy. Yeah, there was a hot and heavy, fast and furious, slow and steady. Okay, they rhymed. That wasn't planned. I'm just genius like that. Just kidding. Hot and heavy, fast and furious, slow and steady. These are some of the ways I constantly see relationships get started. The hot and heavy is like you're going to class, you're totally constantly you're just not even thinking about a relationship, and all of a sudden you see the person as you walk by, and it's like slow motion, hair starts flowing. It's just because the fan's kicked on, but it's beautiful, and you're embracing it, and you walk there, and you see their eyes, and they see you. And this is in slow motion. Everything's in slow motion. As soon as you turn, now that was slow motion. Speed it up. See how fast it was? Yeah, that's dumb. Wah, 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 wah. Yes, that's what I would hear this. So hot and heavy. So then all of a sudden the relationship starts hot and heavy. Things are going good. You guys are attracted to each other. There's chemistry. Whatever the situation, maybe you met at a party. Things were going crazy, whatever. And all of a sudden before you knew it, like you didn't know where that person ended. You begun. You're like, this is just amazing. We love each other. We're just so crazy. We just mesh. We're just like built for each other. This is amazing. And all of a sudden, like as fast and as hot as it ended, all of a sudden before you know it, you start having all these expectations you never talked about. You never talked about what kind of relationship you were meant to have. You never really talked about your feelings and who you really were. You didn't really know each other. You just sort of just jumped into things because there was this hot and heavy attraction. And before you know it, you start arguing and fighting in a hot and heavy manner, and you go out. Well, that's right, that's fine. I don't really care about you anyway. And you probably didn't fully care about that person because you just jumped in for the wrong reason. Second thing is fast and furious. Sometimes you see a person, you actually get to know them, but it's like you just move at a pace that you shouldn't be moving, and you start saying things like, I love you, after knowing them for 2 days. Or like whatever, like you just, and this, I mean, I'm saying this as a person who's done it. I mean, I just, like you get in a relationship and all of a sudden you're like, this is for real, this is forever. Let's talk about our kids, let's talk about our future, let's talk about love, let's talk about whatever. And you guys just get together really fast and furious in your emotions. You get emotionally connected way too fast. Hot and heavy, you get too physically attracted. Too quick, too fast, everything's about that. Fast and furious, you emotionally open up yourselves way too fast and way too furious, and oftentimes the physical follows, because in that emotional intimacy, sometimes as we're with another person, we start to crave the relational intimacy, and so that stuff starts to come together, again, fast and furious. But just as fast and as furious you started up, when it breaks and it breaks down, a lot of times it breaks down fast and furious. Because you move too quick, you move faster than you had time with each other. You did not have enough intimacy with each other, enough time with each other, and your intimacy went faster than your time with them. I should have brought the chart. There's a beautiful chart for that. But we'll talk about maybe that next week. Second thing is slow and steady. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean good or bad, but you start slow, you start steady, and you guys are moving forward in a relationship. But now, it's not again, picking the right person is really important because you start to open up, you're kind of steady, you've been together for a while, and all of a sudden you're in a relationship that you've been with since your freshman year, and you're a senior now, and you've never really broken up, but you guys are just kind of going through it, and you just don't really know why you're in a relationship, but you've just been in a relationship forever. You guys know anyone like that? I know I've had good friends like this. We've seen students go through the ministry like this, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, well, what are you going to do in your life? Where are you going to go? It's like, well, I'm not really sure I'm going to go because this person's always been a part of my life, and we just kind of been through it kind of forever, and you realize that God is calling you in different directions, or both of you in different directions, and sometimes very good directions, but because you never really thought about the direction of your lives, really talked about those things, now you're like, well, what do we do? And slowly but surely the relationship will then kind of fade out. So it's, again, always important to know and understand that how you start will often be how you end. And that's why it's important that you start in the same direction. That's the next thing. I love this passage. It's 1 Corinthians, not just one direction, the same direction. Which would be one direction if it was the same direction, wouldn't it? Sorry. Second bad One Direction joke. 50th bad joke tonight. All right, so anyway, so 1 Corinthians 6:14 says this. And this is strong language. But he says, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? And what do fellowship can light have with darkness? Basically, if you're, and this is a statement I'm just going to kind of say for those of you who are trusted Jesus, those of you guys who are following in Jesus, when you start with somebody, it's really important that you walk with somebody that is a believer with you. If you guys are heading in two different directions, you're going to constantly be pulling each other in two different directions. If you're dating someone that doesn't honor God with their purity or honor God with their lifestyle, they can't fully support you in your direction to honor God with all of your life. And especially as you start to mix together and become one physically, as you move into marriage, you end up in a frustrated marriage where you feel like one person is it's called spiritually single a lot of times in church circles. The person is married with somebody else, but the other person is not walking with the Lord, and it causes a breakdown in how they raise their kids. It causes a breakdown in so many other things. It is so important that you're yoked with the person that's walking in the same way. You guys don't know what yoked is? How many of you guys have never heard the term yoke before? And it's not talking about the yoke that's on the floor. Yoke is something that would go on top of two oxen. This is back in the days when they used oxen to pull plows, and so a yoke would go over the shoulders of both oxen, and together they would pull the plow. But it was always important to have two different oxen of the same power or the same strength, because if they had two of one strength, one that was stronger would start to cause the oxen to pull and bump into the other one because they're pulling the cart faster. If one was slower than the other one, it would cause the thing to drag its feet or get burnt out or burn out the strong one. So it's always important that when you put two oxen together, that they were equally yoked. He was using this analogy for us as people, that if you're going to be going with someone, find someone that's going in the same direction at about the same pace as you are. That doesn't necessarily mean that sometimes you're going to be slower or faster than the other, but you help each other keep pace. And Paul is so forward with this. Is that if you're a believer, you really, 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 really have to date another believer. And that's going to sound harsh, and you can talk about it in your C groups, you can talk with me about it afterwards. It's not meant to cut out other people or say other people are unlovable or unliving with, but if Jesus is your primary pursuit, someone else that you're with needs to have that same pursuit with you. So, start in the same direction. That's the second thing. The third point is this. You are building deep patterns in your relationships. I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but it says this in Proverbs. Above all else, guard your heart, for it flows out of... Okay. Let's read that together, because I can't read it myself. Ready? Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. Thank you for reading the whole thing. Above all else, guard your heart, because everything you do flows from your heart. What you do now is going to carry into other relationships. And you're building patterns of relating, patterns of how you fight fair. And sometimes you find yourself, you don't even realize you're carrying these into relationships, and all of a sudden someone else that you're with, that maybe you're meant to be with, is having to kind of sift through some of the emotional or relational baggage that you carried with you in those relationships. And so guard your heart. Make sure you don't get too entwined. And just be aware that when you're dating, you're building deep patterns of relating in the future. And so pay attention to what you're doing, how you're handling those things now. Fourth thing is this. Protect your purity. PP. Protect your purity. Moving on. Protect your purity. This is really important, though, okay? So, and I love this. This is from Song of Solomon. This is in chapter 2, verse 15. Again, Song of Solomon is loaded with, like, imagery and poetry, and so it's got this stuff in this. Now, a couple things. One is the word foxes or jackals is referring to, like, negative things. There's nothing illicit in that. And then, lastly, vineyards is oftentimes a reference in Song of Solomon is referring to their bodies. So just going to say that before I say this, because I read another passage last time, and we all just went someplace we weren't meant to go. So, here we go. Catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, our vineyards that are in bloom. It's an amazing passage, I think, and I love that it's coming from the guy saying this. And I want to say this to the guys, is guys, take the lead on protecting the purity in your relationship. Take the lead in your own walk. Don't wait and expect the girl to hold the boundaries for you, but take the lead in doing the right thing. That's not necessarily, but it's to both sides. Girls, stop using other things to help guys, because, guys sometimes can be weak, and it happens on both sides. I hear it from both stories. I hear guys telling me about texts and stuff that they're getting from girls that are incredibly aggressive and stuff like that. But the whole point is we need to protect our purity, and this passage is referring to that. It says, catch the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards that are in full bloom. Foxes would oftentimes go through and eat the blossoms off of the flowers that would cause the flowers to have a bad crop in the season. And so basically, in a sense, there's this aggression, this intentionality to catch the things that are going to ruin their purity in the future. Our vineyards that are in bloom. Basically, our bodies are ready to go. We know that. Our bodies can do what they're meant to do when they're with another person that's meant to do what they could do with another person. They're in full bloom right now, but it's not time for them to be used in the way that they're supposed to be used. So we need to be aggressive and go out and keep the foxes from getting there and taking away what they're meant for in the future. And so, in a sense, it's just being aggressive and guarding and protecting your purity. So here's some ways that we can do that. And I got this from Craig Groeschel, and I love these three things. So if you want to protect your purity in a relationship, here is just some things. If you're dating right now or you're going to get in a relationship, I love these words: limit your time, your talk, or your touch. Just limit it. It doesn't say don't do any of these things, but limit your time, your talk, and your touch with another person. First thing is time. Make sure that you limit your time with another person. Make sure you live time with another person, because a lot of times what happens in a relationship is we get in that thing, and all of a sudden we isolate ourselves. We just don't know anything else but that person. Our world becomes about that person. We eat, drink, sleep thinking about that person, and all of a sudden we spend all our waking hours with that person, and we realize, wow, we've kind of limited and ostracized our friend groups because our lives have become about each other. Make sure that you keep time for your friends. Most of our mistakes are going to happen when we're left to our own mind and our own devices. And I love this passage from Jeremiah 17:9. It says, the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? That our own hearts and our own emotions have a way of deceiving us. And if you don't have your friends and your other community of people around you to help you stay strong and stay pure and stay with your right mind, if you're not allowing them to speak into you and listening to your friends and not just making it about you and your boyfriend or you and your girlfriend, you're going to run into some calamity, some trouble, some difficulty. So make sure you limit your time so you have space and time to do the other things that make you feel alive. Because one of the other things that happens too in a relationship is if you spend too much time with a person and that relationship ends like most 97% of other relationships in high school end, sometimes people feel like, I just don't know who I am anymore. I just don't know what to do anymore. I just don't know how to find happiness anymore, because everything in their world became about that person. And one of the ways that you can kind of protect that and protect the purity with that person is by limiting your time. Second thing is this, moving on, limiting your talk. Be careful how much you use your speech. Be careful how much you say in your speech. I meant to throw out Proverbs about this in the speech, but be careful in the talk that you have. I know, have you ever been in a relationship? It's like, I don't know, maybe we don't talk on phones anymore, so it's like all texting, winky face emojis, and heart, and broken hearts, whatever. Poop. Whatever. That's a random emoji. That's one of my favorites, so I'm not going to lie. But be careful about how much you say in your speech. Limit how much you talk. I'm going to say this to the girls as an instruction to the girls, but this goes for guys as well. We tend to feel more emotionally and intimately involved with the more words that we use. Now, that's not really a stereotype. It tends to be a trend amongst women and girls, but it's not limited to girls. Guys the same way. But girls, be careful about how much you share with the guy too early on. And guys tends to be a statistic, but not necessarily all, but guys tend to be more just about like details and facts. Just give me the gist, give me what happened, I'm ready, that was good, sweet, let's go, good game, let's get out there again. Like it's just like, it's gist, let's go. And so sometimes girls, we could feel like we're opening up our hearts and our hearts are opening up and exploding for another person when the guy is listening to that and liking it, but oftentimes we're just looking for the gist. We like it, we appreciate it, but we may not be as emotionally connected to the words that you're sharing with us. Guys, just again going on stereotypes, but not limited to those stereotypes. Be careful how often or how frequently you say words like love or like or careful. Like we get dodgy with those words and sometimes throw them out without thinking at all about the impact that it has on the other person. But for both parties involved, guys and girls, I don't know why you all of a sudden became the guy side and you became the girl side. I noticed I did that last week too, and I apologize because there are girls and guys on both sides. Just saying. All right. But limit your talk. Limit how much you share. Be careful about that. Just be mindful of it. Even when everything in your heart is saying, tell him everything you feel, tell him everything you want, tell her everything, tell her she's beautiful, tell her everything you want to say. Just, hold back a little bit. It's okay to just think it and not tell her right now. Because when you do, sometimes it can help things go faster and further than you need to, especially relationally and especially physically. And then finally, touch. Limit your touch. I love this passage again. It's from 1 Corinthians. We read this last week, but I'm reading it to you guys again. You guys can talk about it in your C groups. But it says this: flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Strong words, but they keep in mind this is against the Bible. We hold this as authority in our lives. And if we really believe this, we have to own this for ourselves. But it says flee from sexual immorality. Flee from, run away, go the opposite direction. Don't just stay there, but run. Go fast. Don't just like, all right, I'll mosey away from it, but get away from it. Run away from it. Run. Fire. You're like, hey, fire. Oh, my foot's on fire. Sorry. Wah, 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 wah. So here are some ways to help you guard your touch, okay? The first thing is this. Be open about your boundaries up front with the person you're dating with them, okay? If you set boundaries for yourself, you say sex is off the limits, and there's some other boundaries that you set for yourself, be okay with your boundaries. Don't let anyone else tell you what your boundaries should be, especially on this side of marriage. They're your boundaries, you keep them, okay? And that, I don't care what arguments, what things, what moments or what emotions or what pleas come out in those conversation texts or whatever, or in the moment. Your boundaries are your boundaries, but you need to communicate them up front. Don't communicate the boundaries in the middle of that time when you're hanging out with that person, you're in the car with that person, or you're at the place with that person, or you're in the bedroom with that person, or wherever you are where you shouldn't be with that person, alone with that person. Don't just wait for that moment. You're like, oh, this is so awesome. You're so amazing. Oh, by the way, I've got boundaries. Because you're not going to be thinking about your boundaries, and they're not going to care about your boundaries at that point, and they're going to want to keep pushing. So be up front, even if this relationship's talking. And you know what? This is a great thing, because if you can be mature and responsible about this up front, if you freak that person out right away, then they're just not ready for it. You'll be like, that's cool, whatever. But if you tell them up front, and they're like, cool, I can respect that, I can honor that, and they really do, you might be off to a good start with the relationship. Be open up front. Second is this. Keep 4 feet on the floor at all times. Bum, bum. Just 4 feet on the floor. It's amazing what happens when your bodies are not horizontal. All right? And I'm going to say this too for the guys and girls that like to snuggle and cuddle and watch movies and think stuff. Because really, when you're watching a movie, about halfway through the movie, at least the guys have stopped thinking about the movie. They just have stopped and they start thinking about a lot of other things. I'm just saying this as a guy. But whatever, you just don't cuddle. And as soon as that person's like on you, maybe it's just the most innocent situation whatsoever. Your arms around them, they're half leaning on you. As soon as a leg goes up, it's amazing. Or as soon as like a leg goes over your lap and you're just sitting there and you're like, this is just so nice. Hands start to wander. It's just, yeah. So keep 4 feet on the floor. If you're really serious about the boundary, keep 4 feet on the floor. When you're hanging out with someone, you're sitting on a couch, make sure that you're not like overly snuggling. Like, but I want to, it's so nice. If you really want to guard your purity, just keep some ideas for this stuff, just think about it. Next thing is this, just keep everything buttoned up. Keep yourself zipped up, buttoned up, clothes on. It's amazing how easy it is to stay pure with your clothes on. It's true, unless you're at a high school homecoming. But I tell you what, anyways. Truth. Come on now. There's a lot of things that they get really creative with their clothes on. I'm just saying, you guys are very creative. Just saying, just gonna keep it real. But remember, keep everything buttoned up. Keep your clothes on. Like you know like what to wear. You know what you're walking into. Know your boundaries. Know what your trigger points are. Know the certain things that are gonna help you like lose your inhibitions. Guys have places. Sometimes it could just be as simple as like someone like stroking your hair, and you're like, that's really nice. Okay, I don't care. Whatever, we'll do whatever now. Like whatever it is, we all have our places that we lose our inhibitions. Pay attention to those things and avoid them. It's not rocket science. It is biological, I don't know, whatever. And then also another thing to keep in mind is, and I love this, Craig Rochelle says this in one of his talks, and I love it, he says, keep your tongue in your mouth as long as you can. I love it. That was pretty honest and pretty upfront. But seriously, I thought about it. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to share that because that's pretty upfront and bold. But it's really kind of true. Sex is a progressive in nature, and we tend to lose interest in something that we're doing long enough. I mean, just seriously, just try like smooching a person over and over again. I rode my bike about 15 minutes, no, 20 minutes to go, and because this girl said she would kiss me, and I went to this whole other neighborhood in this other town. We were like talking and stuff on the phone. I'm like, all right, I'm there, and she's like, I'll kiss you if you bring me a root beer because it's summer and I want a root beer, and I'm like, I got a root beer, I'm gonna go. And I drove my bike out there and we kissed, and I kid you not, for like 2 minutes it was. I know, no one uses my command words. We're good friends. But we've lost a lot of our boundaries, these two. All right, so keeping it going. But after a while, I was like so excited. But after like 2 minutes of doing this, I was like, yeah, all right, we're done. I'm gonna go home, have your root beer, see you later. Like, there's just something in us that eventually wants more physically. It's just how we're built, it's how we're wired. And it's easier to want more a lot, especially when, yeah, you get the idea. So, that's the last one. And also just keep in mind, just because you're close by someone physically doesn't necessarily mean that you're close to that person. Just because you're next to them, just because you spend time with them, just because you're physically connected doesn't really mean that you're emotionally close to them or the way that you should be. And so don't get deceived by that because it feels like closeness. But when the relationship is done, bottom line, guys, remember, limit your time, talk, and your touch. Protect your purity. Remember that you're building deeper patterns in your relationship. Know that how you start is often going to be how you're going to end. And remember, ultimately, that you're dating someone else's husband and wife. But when your relationship is done, if you're dating right and you're dating well, you should feel more secure, more whole, and more pure. And the person that you date should feel the same way. They should feel less about their insecurities, and they should understand more about who they are in Christ. And if you're doing things that's robbing them of any of those things, it probably doesn't have a place in a dating relationship. And so the last question I would ask you is, what's your plan? Because those who fail to plan to fail. Is it the last slide? Is that on there? Did I not put it there? Yeah, okay. Those who fail to plan to fail. So if you're dating, do you have a plan? Do you know what kind of relationship you want to be in? Are you willing to do that? And so I just want to challenge you guys. Are you willing to embrace God's purposes for your relationship? Are you willing to embrace what his plans are for you long term? Are you willing to trust? I just want to say on this side of seeing a lot of pain, I want to see you guys avoid that. I want to see you guys break the trend. I want to see you guys be a revolution in your relationships. Let me pray. Jesus, thank you for us allowing to gather together and just hear and talk. Thank you for this group being patient with my terrible jokes and their willingness to just hear truth from your word. But God, I pray that they don't just take it because I've said it, or they don't just shut me out because I said something that they disagree with, God, but that they'd open up and be real about this stuff. Lord, if there's students that are struggling in a relationship that they're in right now, God, I pray you give them the freedom to either get out or to start talking about it with somebody. If there's people that are struggling with loneliness tonight because they're not in a relationship, God, I pray that that wouldn't drive them to feel like they need to have a relationship to be whole, but they would trust you with their lives first. But God, in all places, I pray that you'd make yourself known through dating or through not dating or through our C groups now. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you guys. You've been awesome. Have an amazing week.